Dear students, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. This is Arafat from FEI Higher Secondary Navagam. Today I am with chapter number 4. Chapter is Heredity and Genetics. It is biology 10th class, and in this chapter I will discuss today as acquired and inherited traits. So it is biology 10th. आज मेरा कॉन्सेप्ट होगा फर्स्ट वन जो ट्रेट्स होते हैं वी कैन से द कैरेक्टर्स which are associated with an individual is of two types. One is the acquired and other is the inherited traits. Today first I will discuss the acquired traits. These are those traits means characters which an individual adapt himself herself by various means which they have expressed in his lifetime. Then acquired trait जो होता है, it is acquired we can say by an individual and by any circumstances. Acquired trait जो होता है, it is expressed in an individual, and ये traits जो होते हैं कैरेक्टर्स इंडिविजुअल में एक्सप्रेस होते हैं, उसमें आ जाते हैं due to the natural environmental factors. These environmental factors, that means environmental factors means the various abiotic factors. I talk about the climatic factors associated with any part of surrounding temperature, water, humidity, rainfall, that means which affect the biotic life, which affect the living organism in those parts of surrounding. And due to the change in environmental factors, some characters are acquired by an individual. Those traits which expresses in this individual due to the environmental factor. This is the external situations which compel an individual to develop such traits, which is with him for a lifetime, which is expressed with him for a lifetime due to the environmental factors. And those traits that he or she developed, जो उसने डेवलप किए हैं अपनी लाइफ टाइम में, और उसका कारण क्या रहा है, उसका कारण रहा है मतलब एनवायरमेंटल फैक्टर्स, मतलब टेम्परेचर. अगर हम देखेंगे मतलब environmental, due to the environmental factors, मतलब some animals adapt themselves in the moist and shady habitat. Some animals adapt themselves in the aquatic. Some animals adapt themselves in the they love the sunlight. We can say they are the photophytic. They are the sunlight loving organisms. They make their life flourish under the sunlight. Some animals, some organisms prefer to live in the shady where there is less intensity of the sunlight. They have adapted themselves. That means natural environment, natural factors compel them, मजबूर किया है वो कैरेक्टर डेवलप करने में जो अब उनके साथ लाइफ टाइम एसोसिएट है. हम उन कैरेक्टर्स उन्होंने डेवलप किए हैं लाइफ टाइम ड्यू टू द एनवायरमेंटल फैक्टर्स या ड्यू टू द एक्सीडेंटल फैक्टर्स. एक तो इस कारण से, दूसरा जो कारण हो सकता है दैट इज द accidental फैक्टर्स जिसके कारण से अब इस इंडिविजुअल में एक नया कैरेक्टर में आया है। इसमें क्या हुआ, एक्सीडेंटल सिचुएशंस में, इंसिडेंटल सिचुएशंस में अब ही लॉस्ट एनी ऑर्गन पार्ट, any body part या his part sometimes because of the accidental approach, because of the accidental factors. He now he is one of the part become misuse, मतलब यूजलेस। वो कारण भी हो सकता है, या मतलब एक्सीडेंटल एफर्ट्स के कारण उसने वो डेवलप किए है। एक्सीडेंटल कारण उसमें क्या आ गया, मतलब वी कैन से मतलब डिसयूज ऑफ ऑर्गन या ऑर्गन डिसयूज हो गया, या जिसके कारण माल फंक्शनिंग ऑफ ऑर्गन आ गई, माल फंक्शनिंग इन ऑर्गन्स। हम कहेंगे बहुत सारे एक्सीडेंटल फैक्टर्स है जिसके वजह, या हम कहेंगे एनवायरमेंटल फैक्टर से क्या हुआ, फूड स्कैरिसिटी, जो जिसके वजह से क्या हुआ, अब इसमें माल न्यूट्रिशन आ गई, इस अब ये वीक पड़ गया, हेल्दी इट बिकम्स वीक, इट बिकम्स थिन, अब ये बिल्कुल वीक बन गया, टिंडर कमजोर हो गया इन द सर्वाइवल। या मिस यूज ऑफ ऑर्गन बाय एक्सीडेंटल अप्रोच, now it is one of the organ is not functioning, now it becomes this deficiency, this misuse, this deficient organ is with him for the lifetime. This is the acquired trait that an organism is acquiring by the external circumstances, that it has no genetical relationship, it has no genetical relationship, it is not genetical characters। जो ट्रेट उसने डेवलप किए हैं, जो कैरेक्टर्स अब उस इंडिविजुअल्स में आए हैं बिकॉज ऑफ द एनवायरमेंटल फैक्टर्स या बिकॉज ऑफ द एक्सीडेंटल फैक्टर्स, वो उसके साथ उस ऑर्गेनिज्म के साथ अब एसोसिएट है, बट जेनेटिक का कोई रोल नहीं है। अगर ये बाय एक्सीडेंट हम कहेंगे एक ऑर्गेनिज्म, इसकी आंख फूट गई बाय इन एन एक्सीडेंट, इन एन इंसिडेंट, अब ये अंधा रह गया फॉर लाइफ टाइम। अगर इसकी टांग कटती है ना, ये लंगड़ा बन गया लाइफ टाइम के लिए। अब वो इसने मिस किया है वो ऑर्गन, इसने लॉस्ट हो गया इसका ऑर्गन फॉर एवर। अब इसको लंगड़ा रहना है फॉर लाइफ टाइम, इसको अंधा रहना है फॉर द लाइफ टाइम। दैट मीन्स मच मोर एनवायरमेंटल डिजास्टर्स, एक्सीडेंटल फैक्टर्स टेक्स प्लेस एनी टाइम एनी वे विद एन इंडिविजुअल, विद दोज ऑर्गेनिज्म, विद दोज पॉपुलेशन which they are facing. These are the characters, the variations which then develops. The acquired trait, it gives the variations. It gives the variations here. It causes the variations among the organisms. Those variations we are seen in the somatic cells. Somatic cells. तभी तो इसको कहा जाता है sometimes it causes the, sometimes it is known as the somatic variation. Somatic, that means acquired trait जो होता है because of the environmental factor, accidental factor, there is a variation in the somatic cells, and there is a somatic variations take place in the population of that area, in the population of that area. उस एरिया का जो पॉपुलेशन होता है उन्होंने अब उसमें वेरिएशन आ गई। कौन सी टाइप ऑफ वेरिएशन? सोमेटिक वेरिएशन, मतलब no genetic variation takes place in no genetic variation takes place. There is no genetic variation, there is no transmission of these traits by parents and offspring. There is no role between, there is no give and take with their with the parents. They have no role with the parents. They acquired these traits. Acquired traits is adapted by an individual by of its own choice, by due to the bad worse circumstances, due to the environmental factors which are restricted to that organisms, to that body cells which he had adapted, which he had bring a change in them at that time. That means it has no relation. It has no relation with the genetics. I will take an example of the acquired trait, right? That you might have seen that in the we are learning music. We are learning music. That means their student learning music is a acquired trait. That means there is a muscular pain. There is a muscular pain in an organism. This is also an example of the acquired trait. It is an also example of the acquired trait. That means these acquired traits that develop in an individual of the population of that area. ये क्या होता है, ये डेथ के साथ जब उस ऑर्गेनिज्म में, उस पॉपुलेशन के इंडिविजुअल में, अब उस इंडिविजुअल की डेथ होती है और डेथ के साथ ये वैनिश होता है, फना हो जाता है. अगर ये अपने लाइफ में इसने कोई चेंज लाई है, इंटरनल या एक्सटर्नल चेंज आई है, एनवायरमेंटल फैक्टर्स के कारण या एक्सीडेंटल फैक्टर्स के कारण या नेचुरल एजिंग के कारण, आप देखिए जो एक्वायर्ड ट्रेट है, हम बूढ़े हो जाते हैं, हमारे फेसेस में रिंकल्स डेवलप होते हैं, हमारे हेयर जो होते हैं वो सफ़ेद होना शुरू होता है, या मतलब डिफिशेंसी के कारण हमारे बुढ़ापापन में कमज़ोरी आती है, हाथ पैर अब वो काम नहीं कर सकते हैं, कुछ खुदा न खास्ता मतलब एजिंग प्रोसेस में जब बूढ़े हो जाते हैं, फिर एक पार्ट ऑर्गन मतलब डिफिशिएंट रहता है काम करने में, अब ये उसमें अडेप्ट आ गए, अब उसमें वो चेंज आ गया है. अब ये चेंज जो है ये फॉर एवर के लिए फना हो जाता है उसके मौत के साथ. जब व्हेन हिज डेथ टेक्स प्लेस देन दैट ट्रेट इज द वैनिश. दैट मीन एक्वायर्ड ट्रेट जो होते हैं, एक्वायर्ड ट्रेट होता है, ये वैनिश हो जाता है, वैनिश होता है, फना हो जाता है, वैनिश with death of that organism, with death of that organism. जब उस ऑर्गेनिज्म की मौत हो जाती है, ये उसी के साथ फना हो जाता है. These acquired traits, these acquired characters that the person, that the individual of a population developed, ये vanish हो जाता है, it is lost with his death, and it is not progressing in the future generations. Acquired traits are not progressive in the future generation. That means we can say it is not progressive in a future generation. It is not progressive in a, not progressive, we can say not progressive in future generation. That means it is not the inherent in, it has no role in the, that is no role in inheritance, no role in inheritance. टेंस में इसका कोई रोल नहीं होता है, ये individually it is, therefore the acquired traits are individually associated. Individually it is associated. It is individually associated with that organism, personally associated with that organism. It is never progressive. It has no role in inheritance. यहाँ पे एक थ्योरी है, that is the, अच्छा ये और एक भी एग्जाम्पल है इसमें, the athlete, an athlete develops his muscles when he participate in the games, Olympic games, he develop muscles, bodybuilder develop muscles, his body shape changes. It is also acquired trait. It is also an acquired trait. ये इसने डेवलप किया है. Then यहाँ पे एक थ्योरी है, that is a theory of acquired, that theory of, एक थ्योरी है that is the theory of acquired characters. Theory of acquired characters, इसको कहते हैं this is known as a Lamarckism. M-A-R-C, Lamarckism. This is also known as the Lamarckism. ये किसने दिया था? They were given by the J.B.D. Lamarck. ये इस biologist ने दी थी theory, gave by this biologist Lamarckism. G.B.D. Lamarck biologist था, इसने ये थ्योरी दिया था, थ्योरी ऑफ एक्वायर्ड इनहेरिटेंस. इसने यही कहा है कि अगर एक इंडिविजुअल ऑफ ए गिवन पॉपुलेशन एक कैरेक्टर डेवलप करता है, एक ट्रेट डेवलप करता है, और दैट ब्रिंग्स अ वेरिएशन इन दोज population that is adapt himself, that is associated with him individually, with him personally, and it is vanished, it is stopped with his death, and there is no progress in role as the individual of a population develop those characters due to the external factors, due to the environmental factors, the external approach, due to the incidental approach they develop, and is very, that means our natural circumstances, our natural surroundings compel us to bring that type of change which is necessary, adapted in that organism in order to make possible survival in that area, in that ecosystem. This is the acquired trait, that is theory of acquired characters. इसको कहा जाता है Lamarckism, that was given by the biologist, name is the G.B.D. Lamarck. इसने ये थ्योरी दी थी, और इसने मतलब एक्सप्लेन किया है इस थ्योरी में what is the acquired trait, how it take place, how the organism develop it later on. And it is the Lamarckism is the first theory of evolution that he proposed in his theory of evolution. That means it is not necessary the evolution takes place by our ancestors, by our parents, characters are developed, then we see it in a future generation. It is not necessary always. There is also sometimes due to the natural calamities and character develop in an organism by naturally that change associate with some limited number of individuals of that population, then this character is associated personally, individually to that organism, and it is stopped and it is vanished on his death. Then second is the inherited trait. हमारा topic ही आज है. Second is the inherited trait. Inherited traits. That means inherited characters. That means it has a genetic. It brings genetic variations. It brings genetic variations, or we can say that inheritance variation. Inheritance variation भी कहो या genetic variations कहो. ये कैसे आता है? This inherited traits are passed by the parents. Parents are responsible, then it passes from parents to the offspring. It is inheritance takes place. ये वो traits होते हैं, वो characters होते हैं, ये वो characters होते हैं जो हमेशा transfer होते हैं parents to the offspring. That means expression is seen in the offspring when it is transmission, when it is inheritance takes place. Therefore it is known as the it brings then inheritance variations, genetic variations. Then we can say this inherited traits are seen, they are seen in generations, seen in future generations, generations. And also the theory of जो theory दी थे डार्विन ने, डार्विन also support this. डार्विन जो है, डार्विन की जो थ्योरी है, जिसको हम कहते हैं Neo-Darwinism tells about the genetic approach, genetic theory. That means genetic theory, that means there, if a variation takes place in a future generation, and that means it is genetical variation. That means there are the mutation in genes. Sometimes there are the mutation in genes. They change characters suddenly, occasionally in an organism, and successfully thrive their life in that part of surrounding. Successfully वो अपना life गुजारते हैं. और वो अभी हम आगे पढ़ेंगे evolution by means of genetic variations. When genetic variation is possible, then when there is a inheritance traits, inheritance characters, we get those traits, we get those characters from the parents. Parents are responsible, their inheritance takes place, and expression is seen in the offspring. As Neo-Darwinism is a concept which modern Darwinism, which gives us the conclusion of about the genetic material, role of genetic material in bringing the variations in the organisms. Darwin ने अपनी थ्योरी में ये भी कहा कि there is a change in characters in an organism due to the natural circumstances. Also he told then in the modern theory of the Darwin that Neo-Darwinism, after the Darwinist theory, there is also a genetic variations that take place in an organism when occasionally and eventually that variation, वो character develop होता है by chance in that individual, then that character in less number develops in a progressive future generation. In a progressive generation it is seen in huge number, then there is a survival of those small number of individuals of that population, which is known as the genetic drift. That means जो यहाँ पे जो inheritance या जो traits है, it brings a genetic variations. You have seen, we have in humans, we have free air lobes and we have fused air lobes. It is an inherited trait. For example, you might have seen in humans, in human population, in humans, you might have seen this type of character, free air lobes and closed या फ्यूज्ड, हम कहेंगे फ्यूज्ड एयर लोब्स. आपने देखा होगा जो हमारा एयर लोब होता है, किसी में देखा जाता है इट इज फ्यूज्ड एंड किसी में देखा जाता है इट इज फ्री. that I have a free ear lobe, and in some humans this is a fused. It is a genetic, it is an inheritance character that we get from the parents, that is inheritance by the ancestors, our grandparents. Sometimes character is seen, it is transmission is take place in the offspring in new generations. Also there is a development of characters, and we always obtain the inherited traits by our parents. They have because of the gene mutation, chromosome mutation, or sometimes bring a new variant. New variant species, it causes the new variant species in a population. New variant species in that population. आपने ये एग्जाम्पल तो देखा कि this is the one of the example in free air lobes and fused air lobes. Another example you might have seen in the second example, tallness and dwarfness. Tallness and dwarfism. Tallness and dwarfness in pea plant में आप जो मेंडल ने pea plant पे काम किया है. In a pea plant it is also genetic characters that pea plant develops that tallness. कुछ pea plant height में tall थे, कुछ pea plant height में dwarf थे, that means shortest in height. And also some genetic variation, genetic characters which we ascend, which we descend from, by which we where there is possible transmission, inheritance by our parents. Another inherited trait is the sickle cell anemia. Sickle cell anemia. This is the sickle cell anemia. जो इसमें आरबीसी जो सेल्स होते हैं वो सिकल शेपर्ड आरबीसी सेल्स होता है. सिकल शेपर्ड सिकल सेल एनीमिया सिकल शेपर्ड आरबीसीज होते हैं. दोज सिकल शेपर्ड आरबीसीज आर द डिफॉर्मेटेड, हम कहेंगे डिफॉर्मेटेड. नॉर्मल शेप होता है डिस्क शेपर्ड. इन ह्यूमन्स वी हैव अ disc shaped RBC cell in normal in structure, but in this it is a disease associated with the blood that there is a deformated जो होते हैं इसमें सिकल सेल एनीमिया RBC cells होते हैं. इस तरह सिकल फॉर्म में होते हैं. सिकल फॉर्म में होते हैं. It is a deformated form of RB cells to that of the normal RBCs. There are various inherited characters that we get by our parents. When there is sometimes there is a random fusion of the gametes during the gametogenesis. When there is a gametogenesis means formation of gametes, then there is a random due to the random fusion of gametes there also bring about the variations. Thereafter brings about the variations in individuals. Bring about the variations in individuals in that population, and then these variations are in inheritance. When there is the inheritance of variation from parents to the offspring, it is known as the heredity. This is concept. It is your chapter's name. That means this type of, when there is the inherited traits, there is a genetic variation. There is a genetic variations, because we develop such traits by the genetic cross, by the genes. When there is a transfer of genes from parent to the offspring, then those genes express those characters, those traits in a new offsprings. Then they bring us about the genetic variations. Then these genetic variations are later on controlled. They can be controlled by the dominant genes and recessive genes. In a contrast, they have our power to them. Sometimes आपने देखा कि dominant gene कैसे character suppress करते हैं recessive gene के. और तो किस तरह dominant gene, there is a law of dominancy. Dominant gene किस तरह वो character होने नहीं, express नहीं होने देते offsprings में. When there is a in the counterpart there is a recessive gene. Here is the genetic variation. There is a control, and then this inherited trait is progressive in. It is progressive in future generation. मैंने बताया इसमें acquired traits में जो हमने variations आ गए वो progressive नहीं है future generation में, but inherited trait हमने देखा they are progressive in future generation. Future generation में ये progressive है. Future generation में ये मतलब ये character develop हो गए. फिर those generation go to this character develop the next generation. That means it is going on. It is progressive in nature. And it is I think this is all about the inherited traits, or those traits which we obtain, which we get from our parents, and they are progressive in future generations and bring about the genetic variations, and is controlled. Sometimes genetic variation prove better. It proves better in to survive. It proves better to survive in nature. Better to survive in the nature. The nature always have what the nature have? Nature always have natural environment. नेचर एनवायरनमेंट जो होता है ये हर वक्त हमारे लिए एक सरप्राइजिंग होता है, अमेजिंग होता है. we should always stand by against the natural in the natural environment, in the natural surroundings. We always should stand. Then there is necessary, हम आगे पढ़ेंगे how the Darwin in his theory told us about that there should be a natural selection. There is natural selection when there is a when there is a development of new variant species, and those new variant species sometimes prove much more better than the previous generation, than the older generation. The next future generation, new generation, descent generation proves much more better to thrive themselves in a better way in that natural surrounding. Natural surrounding, once again I tell you, is always a surprising, amazing to the survival. Then we always should be alert, stand up, and there should be always there should be a genetic variation sometimes prove better and different in the survival, in the fitness of survival. Dear students, this is all about this topic, acquired and inherited traits, how we can differentiate. You can also differentiate it in a various points. It is all about this topic. Thank you very much.